So you have clearly application to peer-to-peer protocol. You know, peer-to-peer protocols are the protocols you use to share files, okay, with each other. And clearly, the nice thing with this Kleinberg model is that everybody is close with each other. We only have local view, and we are still able to find things. Okay, so these are, and this is completely decentralized. So these are exactly what we are looking for this peer-to-peer protocol. So it has huge impact on that field. And a question I like in particular is try to understand really whether this navigability property has a dramatic impact on the performance. I mean, does our local view prevent us from reaching the diameter of the graph always? Okay. So I'd like to thank you, and it's time for a pause. Yep.
So, as I understood the idea of the smallworld networks, there is a big question is about the hubs. So when you make a decision, you know that you are going to make contact with a hub, or you have an idea. For example, if you are looking at your social contact, you know there is always someone that has a lot of friends and a lot of know people. That's why the idea is in the when you look for someone, you look someone that you know already that has a lot of connections.
But the problem with that is that if everybody asks this person, he won't be able to answer to everyone.
Yeah, but there is different kind of hubs. That's why the people in the USA, what they used to say is, I don't know if I'm going to achieve the goal to send this letter to Boston, but I know someone that probably knows someone that is close.
Yes, exactly.
You know,
yeah.
This is why. So you are not doing
that's the idea of the exploration-based algorithm. Is that you look at in the neighborhood and then you get more chance to grab people. Okay, but there are still studies about whether the path goes through high-degree nodes. We don't know, because it could be the case that naturally the greedy algorithm or any other algorithm will find the high-degree node. But I'm not really convinced by this explanation, because I'm really doubting that people that knows a lot, that are known by a lot of people, would answer, would matter. Because if they would, then they would be busy, very, very busy. I mean, imagine that somebody is known by 1 million people. He won't be able to forward 1 million message. Okay, and I'm not really convinced with that. I have really problem with capacity. I think we should have capacities. I completely agree with, for instance, viral spreading. For virus spreading, it has nothing to do with small world. Okay, it has nothing to do with small world because the virus is not trying to reach anybody. But clearly, here hubs have a strong importance. But really, virus spreading has nothing to do with the small world thing. It has nothing to do with friendship or whatsoever. It's a really completely different process. So I totally agree that for viruses and everything, definitely power laws has a huge impact and totally makes sense. But for the small world thing, I doubt. I have serious doubt.
The probability to arrive to a point where you want to go is higher if you know that the node that you are going to connect has much connection. You know, if you know that your node has just 2 friends, the probability.
But you will not probably send the letter to somebody which is too busy to care. That's the point. That's that's what I believe. But anyway, nobody will ever know. So we are just trying to get some clue. Remember that yesterday I mentioned that, you know, if something small does what you want, it's more likely to appear randomly than something larger. Okay, that's because it consumes less resources and everything. That's an idea that I have. I don't know if it's true or not. But I think it's quite reasonable. So the question we asked were, okay, so what about small systems? You know, the biologists are studying, you know, networks, gene networks, which are huge, with a lot of connections everywhere. Okay, and the first question to ask is, okay, but let's start with something small, okay, very small, and try to see whether we can prove anything, okay? And that's basically what we had in mind. Okay, start with something really small and try to see whether we manage to do something. And that's not that simple. So let's look at something which is asynchronous systems. So what's the idea behind that is that basically okay, when your body is growing, okay, cells are communicating with each other. It's a fairly slow process in the sense that, for instance, for a gene, for switching from activated to inhibited, it takes something like 10 minutes. Okay, at least between 10 and 14 minutes. Okay, for a gene to travel from one cell to its neighbor, it takes something like 10 minutes. Okay, so it's a really, really slow process. And so studying asymptotic behavior might be satisfying. Okay, it is important to study the things also at the early stage of the process. Okay, and second, there is absolutely no reason why the body would be synchronous. Okay, if it takes 10 minutes to go from one cell to another, it takes 10 minutes to switch from one state to another, it's more or less likely that everything is asynchronous, or at least some things. Okay, because you know that you have a nervous system which is quite fast. We have also the hormones which are quite fast and everything. But you know, if you look at the genes, these are really slow process. Okay, and the question is, okay, so it's nice to study cellular automata, but okay, but we have, however, to take into account the fact that things might not be synchronous. Okay, and what's the impact? So. Bon, okay, so let's model gene networks with cellular automata. Why not? Okay, I'm not claiming that it makes sense in any way. Okay, but why not? Okay, so you have cells close to each other and they communicate and they switch their states. Okay, and so a gene is activated or inhibited, and you have some rules. Okay, given that my neighbors, this gene is activated, then I will activate the genes or not. Okay, so the question is, okay, what will happen? Will we ultimately converge to anything? Okay? So first, this makes sense. I mean, there are examples in nature where cellular automata are suspected to exist. For instance, this shell here, the growth of this shell is suspected to be related to this function here, which is cellular automata rule 13. Okay? So you know the shell grows here, and you see this kind of patterns here that looks pretty much like the distortion of the pictures here. So there are other evidences that are given. For instance, for the leaves of plants. The leaves of plants, there is no central nervous systems in the plant they studied, and they were looking at the activity of a leaf. The leaf has a trade-off. It has to solve is to open or close the little holes that let the carbon dioxide enter. Okay, if they don't open it, the plant does not get its alimentation. Okay, and if it opens it too wide, then evaporation kills the plant because it dries. Okay, so it has to find the right size. Okay, and what they studied in this paper was how does the leaf decide locally what size it should open its holes. Okay, and it turns out that they assume that it looks like majority. They can do comparison, and basically the pictures they observe are pretty much like the pictures you would expect from a cellular automata. And they do some correlation, and they came up with the conclusion that the way the leaf decide what trade-off it has between alimentation and drying is basically based on some local rules that looks pretty much like cellular automata. So it's just an argument to tell you that cellular modeling by cellular automata, gene networks, and everything can, up to some sense, make sense. Okay. So as I mentioned before, transition in biological systems are very slow. Okay, it's only 10 minutes at least 10 minutes for switching from activated to inhibited. Okay, it takes about 10 minutes to traverse from one cell to the neighboring cells. So everything is really slow.